Brian, are you switching screens as soon as you start?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, because I was still looking at Kool-Aid's screen.
Oh, you're seeing my screen.
Oh, okay. That's not the beginning, though, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Going live now. Start broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to Social Media and Long-Term Recovery. This is one of our series of webinars that I'm really looking forward to. But during the webinar today or at your convenience at another time, please take a moment to visit our Facebook page. Our page has information on long-term recovery webinars, workshops, and much more. And if you like us on Facebook, you'll be notified when we share something new via our social media channels. So find us under the name of Church World Service U.S. Disaster Assistance. Very quickly, we will go over some of the mechanics of the webinar. We're being recorded. This recording will be posted on our website, and that website is www.cwserp.org, and we will keep you posted as to when these materials are made available through Facebook, but it should be within a few days. Everybody can hear the webinar today in one of two ways. The webinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen will guide you through setting yourself up to hear through earphones connected to your computer or by telephone, and that gives you the telephone call number. Everybody is muted, except the presenters, of course. Maybe at the end of the time we will be able to open up everyone's mic for some live questions. But in the meantime, if you have questions, please ask those questions by using the raise your hand function or by typing in a question on the question box that's on the right-hand side of your screen. The directions are here. We'll collect those questions during the presentation, and then at a break or a pause in the presentation, we will ask the presenters to answer those questions that you've typed in. You can get a copy of the presentation at the website that I've already given or that is listed on the slide here. All participants can download a PDF copy of the slides in a few days, but you may also listen to the recording if you choose to do so. There will be a certificate of attendance for those who stay on the webinar throughout its entirety. An electronic certificate will be sent to you by the end of the week. If you don't get yours by next week sometime, or if you cannot download a copy, please email Kool-Aid at kfun@churchworldservice.org, and she'll see that you get one. Now, real quickly, I'd like to introduce our team. Our Associate Director for Domestic Emergency Response is Barry Shade. Barry lives in Olathe, Kansas. His contact information is listed here. Barry is responsible for coordinating our work as the Emergency Response Specialist, keeping our communion leaders informed, and representing the interests of the Emergency Response Program to the other programs and staff within Church World Service. Joanne Hale is the Emergency Response Specialist who lives in Buffalo, New York, or near Buffalo, New York. Her region of assignment includes much of the East Coast and Florida, so she's really busy right now dealing with Hurricane Sandra. We'll see the regional map, Sandra, region with Hurricane Sandy. The regional map will be shown in a minute with our respective regions of assignment. I'm Brian Krausor. I have responsibility for much of the Midwest. I live in either Iowa or Missouri at any given time of the year. Our emergency response specialist for much of the South, from the Carolinas through the western states is to New Mexico, is Sandra Kennedy O's, who lives in Mobile, Alabama. Kule Fun is our specialist who lives in Honolulu, and she is our presenter for today. And here is the map with our regions of assignment. So I'll give you a moment to take a look at those while we change to presenters so that Kule can begin the presentation.
Thanks, Brian. There you go. Okay, thanks for introducing us today, Brian. Today we'll be talking about social media and other web tools that can help you in your long-term recovery groups. There are a lot of terms that are used to refer to long-term recovery groups. For example, I've heard Unmet Needs Committee, I've heard Roundtable, or just plain committee. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I'll be using the term long-term recovery group, or LTRG, to encompass the general tasks of what LTRG accomplishes. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. The connections we have with those we care about bring meaning to our lives. How we connect is also important. Social media has a great amount of potential to connect us to those we care about and others who we care about, but we don't really have that much contact with or we have never met before. We bring meaning to our lives by the people that are in our lives. The people that we love and care about make our lives what it is. When we connect to another human being, our brains release a chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is linked and related to many biological functions and also plays an important role in our emotions. Researchers have found that an increase in oxytocin in the brain is linked to emotions such as love, trust, and generosity. There's a spike of oxytocin when we connect to other people. Research on this topic was conducted by Paul Zak, a researcher that has popularized neuroeconomics, a field that combines economics, biology, neuroscience, and psychology. And in one study he conducted, a young man chatting via Facebook online showed an increase of oxytocin by over 150%. So the point behind the science is this: when we connect to other people, we are capable of far more than if we were to work alone. And if we're increasing healthy chemicals in our brain that promotes wellness, then why not find more ways to connect? Our emergency response program is designed to promote trust among all agencies that work together in all aspects of long-term recovery. And as you listen today, the thing that I want you to take away from this presentation is not that social media is an awesome way to stay connected, because we already know that. It is that what I want you to remember is that establishing trust can create a lasting bond that can help you achieve grand results. Pictured here is a very broad diagram that shows what kind of social media sites are available for specific purposes. You may have seen it before, or you may not. You may have already have extensive knowledge with any of these social media platforms. I'm sharing this diagram with you so you can think of the creative ways to use these platforms that you already have, or use others and apply it to the topics that I will be discussing today. So for the purposes of today's webinar, I created my own graph for social media, specifically used in emergency response. So as I did research for this webinar, I realized that social media has brought about new terms and styles that were not around 15 years ago. The Associated Press has come up with a new section dedicated to, in its manual, that is dedicated to social media terminology and newer versions. So with changes such as this, social media is changing our world and how we communicate. Social networking is no longer limited to merely keeping in touch with friends. It is a revolution that we do not see slowing down within our near future. So who uses social media? According to the Pew Research Center, 66% of online adults ages 18 and over use social media platforms to share information, videos, and pictures. And of these users, 67% use social media to stay in touch with friends and family. So about a third of smartphone owners use their phone to get real-time location-based information, and 18% use a geo-service to check in to certain locations to share their locations with friends. In a study conducted over 3 cities, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Macon, Georgia, and San Jose, California, 32% of internet users get local news from social networking sites. About 19% get them from blogs, 7% from Twitter, and about 32% post updates and local news on social networking sites. So that's a big chunk there. The most topic researched about is the weather at 89% of internet users. And I'm sure you have researched weather conditions at one time or another, especially if there's a threat of a natural disaster. Social media has become an integral part of emergency response. Because many social media users share and post information during an emergency event, responders are using this information to their advantage. Listed above are 7 phases in which social media is being used, and I will share a brief success story in each stage. Here's a diagram that you may already be familiar with, showing the stages of a disaster. I will go over them briefly to familiarize you with them again. So, starting at the top of the diagram, in phase 1, is the warning and anticipation phase. Phase 2 is when the disaster physically hits the community and rescue work is underway. Phase 3, the emergency has immediately passed, and it is when the agencies and organizations start to respond. In the 4th phase, community tends to its medical and survival needs. Phase 5, rescue and relief continues through short-term recovery as the community is coming together to help one another. In the 6th and final phase, long-term reconstruction takes place. Many organizations use a diagram like this. However, one phase that is not depicted here is a preparedness phase, which is equally important that I mentioned earlier. So in preparedness, social media is used to encourage the public to be prepared for emergency situations. A good example of this is the Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense. So to cut this name short, I'm going to refer to it as the Guam HSO. The Guam HSO achieved a great amount of participation with its Great Shakeout campaign for earthquake preparedness. Over 58,000 participants out of a population of 180,000 people shared information through Facebook and Twitter. The campaign attracted 15,000 more participants than the previous year using Facebook, Twitter, and the media to communicate the message to the public. In another campaign called Ready Guam, Twitter and Facebook followers were asked to post a picture of themselves with a disaster preparedness kit to win a t-shirt with the words #ready, #Guam. This is an example of how to keep followers engaged. Through frequent messages, the Guam HSO posts information and other agencies about emergency situations, such as power outages and weather updates. With use of their social media, they are able to answer immediate questions the general public may have about these situations as they arise. On National Preparedness Day, the Guam HSO also hosted a 5K run walk and used Facebook as a major tool to spread the word about the event, and that's how they used it to invite followers as well. In the warning and anticipation phase, social media users begin sharing and posting news. Of the 6 phases, this phase and the impact and emergency phase, which I will discuss next, are the peak times of message and news sharing. An example of this is pictured here on this slide. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, also known as CAL FIRE, uses YouTube, Skype, and Twitter, and Facebook to provide on-the-spot news of wildfires to the public. Through these channels, they are able to inform their network on preparedness and prevention programs, as well as fire condition updates, and social media can be used to supplement your communication channels to get messages out to the general public. During the immediate impact of the disaster, social media is used to send immediate news and updates as the emergency situation unfolds. During this phase, there are many social network users that either share updates of their own or repost information. Emergency managers and first responders may sometimes use this information to locate specific areas that may be impacted more severely than others. In the beginning of 2012, emergency managers in Seattle, Tacoma, Vancouver, and Bellevue in Washington state used social media monitoring sites such as TweetDeck, Hootsuite, Twitterfall, Monitor, and TrendsMap to send out alerts about the severe snow and ice storms that were affecting the northwestern states at that time. So during severe weather, news and updates are posted to track road conditions, power outages, accidents, and other major damages in busy areas. Emergency managers also use their network to pinpoint impact and response efforts in certain areas. Because they had a well-established and broad-based social media network, it enhanced the level of trust the community had in their response efforts. Trusted networks such as these encourage members to share their own personal networks, which extends the reach of emergency managers. During an emergency, rumors can be spread that can cause unnecessary worry in the community. The city of Rocky Mount, North Carolina used Twitter and Facebook during Hurricane Irene. The city government monitored social media posts of the general public and discovered a few rumors. One rumor claimed that animals in the pet shelters would be euthanized before the hurricane hit. And another rumor claimed that the Tar River Reservoir Dam had become a hazard and would burst during the hurricane. So emergency managers dispelled the rumors through posts on Twitter and Facebook by telling the public the truth rather than what was being spread. A recent rumor was spread through Twitter, and pictured here is a flooded neighborhood after Hurricane Sandy. On the lower right-hand corner, you can see a shark fins in the water. So this photo was edited and is not real. However, according to the news report from ABC, Christopher Dold, the Vice President of Veterinary Services at SeaWorld, said, "This would certainly be unusual, but not beyond the realm of possibility." So while it is very unlikely it could happen, but this photo is definitely edited. But that did create quite a stir on Twitter and Facebook. Social media can be used to demonstrate transparency and accountability during a disaster, so particularly in the relief and remedy phase. City governments in some states across the U.S. use social media to post updates during an emergency event. So many cities start building their social networking contacts in peacetime, so when the disaster strikes, they have a strong list of followers to repost and share their information. When the original post is from a trusted source, it makes the information more credible. Pictured here is a video on YouTube from Operation Smoky Hill. And it was a drill that was conducted at Crisis City in Saline County, Kansas. Crisis City is a state-of-the-art training center. The drill was to evaluate emergency response in a terrorism scenario. It involves 300 first responders from local, state, and federal agencies, and the Kansas Division of Emergency Management posted the drill on YouTube to share the information so they could respond, and to show how they would respond in an emergency situation. Social media is used in short-term recovery to locate survivors, respond to the request for help, and also chart immediate needs. Text can be tracked and mapped by remote volunteers that are not in the immediate vicinity of the emergency event. The information is then used by search and rescue teams, relief workers, and other aid agencies to help them focus on humanitarian response. Social media mapping tools such as TrendsMap, Hootsuite, and Monitor pinpoint subject searches in a particular geographical location, which allows users to monitor the popularity of a subject in a given area. For example, if you were to use TrendsMap and search for the popularity of the word earthquake in, let's say, Smithtown, USA, after an earthquake, you would be able to see all the Twitter users that tweeted the word and the area of the world it was most tweeted. Another option is to type in a location and it will show you the most popular topics in that area. So this is a screenshot of the search earthquake, of the word earthquake, taken on September 10th, 2012. It shows that there was a 2.6 magnitude earthquake in Brawley, California. The word was also tweeted in Japan and Russia that day. So of course, you can choose which area is most relevant to you. The use of social media in long-term recovery has been gaining popularity in communities across the country. This webinar is dedicated to the topic, and I'm going to share what is currently being done and to discuss ways to maximize the use of these tools in your LTRG. Pictured here are a few Facebook pages that are currently gaining popularity in this region. So if you can take a close look, it's the Morgan County / West Liberty Long-Term Recovery Committee and also the Joplin Long-Term Recovery Committee. So this is a broad survey of the use of social media, and don't feel discouraged if you don't use these tools already, or if you aren't using any at all to any extent at all. And you can always take what social media platforms you're already using and use that works best for you. But these are just some ideas that you can throw into your social media strategies if you're using already. So before we get into the topic of this presentation, I will briefly define what an LTRG is. A long-term recovery group is a cooperative body that is made up of representatives from faith-based, nonprofit, government, business, and other organizations working within a community to assist individuals and families as they recover from a disaster. The LTRGs are varied in their structure as they are the communities in which they work. The personality and operation of each group is unique and reflects local needs, available resources, cultural diversity, leadership style, and community support. So no matter how a group is structured or what it calls itself, for example, Unmet Needs Committee, an interfaith, an organization, a coalition, the goal is always the same: to unite recovery resources with community needs in order to ensure that even the most vulnerable in the community recover from the disaster. After the disaster, many social media users will be interested in what happened in the area. Keeping your network informed of what is going on in the area will begin to spark their interest as you start your LTRG. In many of our previous webinars and trainings, we emphasize that it is never too early to start a long-term recovery group. As recovery efforts in the community are underway, start getting to know people to form a long-term recovery group. Some states have permanent standing LTRGs that become active after an emergency. These LTRGs are often connected with a VOAD, which stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, in the state. It is a good idea to gain recognition in your community before an emergency. However, if your community did not organize a LTRG beforehand, you can use the attention that the disaster has garnered to begin a long-term recovery effort. And the goal is this: to match recovery resources with unmet needs of individuals and families affected by the disaster. I will discuss how social media can help the process of meeting this goal and how likes can help, among other strategies. Early in the process, make sure to discuss topics that will be and should be posted in your social media channels. Tell your LTRG and keep an eye out for these opportunities. As we move further into the presentation, I will discuss topics that will be beneficial to your social network and also topics that should never be posted. For those of you who use Facebook, you have seen the like option before. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept, it's an option on Facebook that allows users to follow the updates and posts of that particular page. For example, if you were to like us, our US U.S. Disaster Assistant page, you'd receive notifications of everything we post. You will see our updates, photos, and videos, or anything that we make public on the page. You also allow your network of friends to see what you like and that you like us as well. So likes can be very powerful. Because you are visible to a broader network, you are promoting your updates to more than your immediate friends. You are also visible to their friends. And with increased visibility, you'll be able to crowdsource, which I will discuss next. Crowdsourcing is outsourcing tasks to a large audience of people. The crowd is your audience, the people in your network. So you can post descriptions of the type of skills that you may need after a disaster, and this may turn up a loosely organized group of volunteers or organization that has trained staff and volunteers. Whichever you attract first, it is helpful to be specific and post thorough job descriptions so volunteers know exactly what you are looking for and whether or not they meet the criteria. The volunteers that respond to your request might be both in, around, and outside the affected disaster area. So by posting, tagging, and mapping data points such as location, time, need, and service, volunteers will know what to expect when they reach the location and what you may need help in. Crowdsourcing can be effective in all areas of your LTRG. In previous webinars and on-site training, we talk about the 7 different components of an LTRG and how they can function together to achieve the greatest results. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of the LTRG is to match resources in the community with disaster-related needs. Because this is the main goal, each component usually has the same idea of success. You might want to refer to our last webinar, LTR Basics, for details on how to create a unified vision of recovery. The recorded version will be posted on our website, and we will also have LTR Basics once again in December if you haven't seen it already. Your social media channels should always share your goals, mission statement, bylaws, and any other unifying documents that the group brainstorms together. Each component of the LTRG should always share its hard work, its trials, solutions, and successes. Today I will talk to you about how you can apply social media to your LTRG, or if you already have the online presence, you may find ways on how to maximize it. Having a good communication strategy can act as a catalyst towards the success of your LTRG, and social media can help. Create a communication strategy that keeps in touch with the media. Often news stations will always look for the worst stories and report on that. So many times they will look for a scandal. If you want good news stories about your hard work, it is your responsibility to give them news stories, good news stories. One of the ways that you can do so is by directing media to your social media networks. You can share important milestones in recovery with your social media using photos, videos, and updates. And it's a good idea to tell reporters that to publish your Facebook page so that you get greater visibility as well. Keeping in touch through your social media networks can help create a feeling of connection between the donors, the volunteers, the clients, and the general public. So your goal is to also attract sources for donations and also much needed volunteers, especially further down the line. Another aspect of a well-rounded communication strategy is education and advocacy. Many people do not understand what long-term recovery entails, so this is your opportunity to show them. Educate the public about unmet needs and how the community can respond. Social media is a great platform not only to share your hard work, but also to gather support. This is also a good way to present to executive boards and stakeholders your progress, challenges, and solutions. So pictured here is a long-term recovery group of Northern Colorado's group page. And they share their mission and other important resources as well. You can see the members there, and all the information that they're sharing is public. And you can see me, there's my mug there, I'm part of that group as well. So if anyone is on the line from that group, thank you for allowing me to use your page. If you are already a Facebook member, you might already know about the Facebook group or page functions. Pictured here is where you can find both the pages and the groups functions of your Facebook page. It is under your mug, or in this case, my mug, on the left-hand side of the screen. If you start a group, you will be able to post documents, photos, and video, and it allows your post to be visible to the public. There are 4 tabs on a group page: About, Events, Photos, and Files. Within these tabs, you can post information about what you're doing and what your mission is. I will show you what these tabs look like on the next slide. On a group page, this is where you can find the tabs I just mentioned. The amount of information you post will showcase your hard work in the community. You can also create a Facebook page, which I will briefly discuss next. So in these tabs, if you can see About, Events, and Photos, and also Files, under About you can say what your mission statement is. You can share what your main goals are within your long-term recovery group using your Facebook page. Under Events, you can share if there's any meetings or if you're going to hold any volunteer training programs. Under Photos, of course, that's self-explanatory. And Files. Files, I found them to be very useful because you can post documents. You can post Word documents, PDF files, or any kind of files that would be helpful for anyone to understand the mission of your LTRG. Facebook pages work much like your profile page, except it is a public page that everyone that has a Facebook account can see. I'm discussing how to create a Facebook group or page because all of the social networking sites, Facebook has the most functions and allows users to post and share a variety of multimedia messages. This makes Facebook an excellent way to keep users informed of your progress, and is also one of the most popular. So I think it's very useful to get your message out. I'm going to start with volunteer management. A little earlier I mentioned how you can crowdsource using social media. Right now I will give you more details on how social media can be useful in this component of your LTRG in volunteer management. With a Facebook group or page, you can post the type of volunteers that you are looking for, what skills he or she must possess, and other important factors that will affect the individual as he or she enters your community after disaster. For example, you might be looking for volunteers in construction, specifically pouring concrete for foundations. Because there are many hazards that are still in the area after cleanup, you might want to ask them to have a current tetanus shot. You can post a volunteer job description along with the links to nearby clinics that offer tetanus shots. It may help your potential volunteer to know the cost involved, if any, as well. So using your page as an information source is a good way to reinforce your messages to volunteers, and it also shows your donors that you care. Your social media channels should reflect the cultural diversity, leadership style, and community support and engagement. So don't leave out people that make up your community. Some good questions to ask as you get your Facebook pages started are: what cultures comprise your community? Is there an active African American community? Is there an active Asian American community, namely Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, just to name a few? Are there Italians, Latinos, or other groups that you can share your social media platforms? Sharing the diversity in your community will show that your mission is inclusive and not exclusive of anyone in your community. Another point that can be shared on your social media channels is your leadership style. Show photos of the leaders talking to groups and also share messages directly from that person. This will show the personality of the leaders and their approachability. We are always more responsive to someone that is friendly and positive, and it's a good way to showcase your leaders' personality and have them post their update. If you have them post their updates on the group progress or areas that need solutions, we all respond to people who are honest and willing to communicate. Your community support and engagement will shine through everything that you share. In the disaster case management component of your LTRG, social media can be used to share profile information with your network. Having your disaster case workers or disaster case managers create a Facebook page and profile their information and post photos of themselves can help the clients and survivors that they work with feel more comfortable. By having information posted, such as photos and background and working experience, it serves as an online resume that allows clients, the LTRG members and organizations, and also the executive committee members to view. LinkedIn is also another website that you can share your resume and skills. So putting a face on the hard work that is being done in the community helps donors see that their donated dollars are being spent conscientiously, and which will motivate them to donate again. Pictured here is a screenshot of my profile on Facebook. I am not a disaster case manager, but this photo gives you an idea of the type of information that can be posted. So if you take a closer look, I have some of the responsibilities I have working within Church World Service. Disaster case managers can also post the assessment process on his or her Facebook page or LinkedIn page. This is a great way for clients, donors, and the public to know about the work that is being performed in the community. If clients know that there is a uniform process that is linked to a bigger organization, it may help them feel a lot more comfortable while working with the DCM in the long term. Pictured here is an outline of the United Methodist Committee on Relief, or UMCOR, assessment process. Your LTRG may have a different process, but I use this as outline as an example on how you can share your unique assessment process. Construction management can benefit from having photos, video, and updates of their progress in the community. Because this is one of the most physically active committees on LTRG, although some may disagree, there will be many opportunities for great photos. Posting safety precautions on your Facebook page to be shared with the LTRG helps members and volunteers know if there are any hazards in the areas that they are working in. So, for example, if the weather will not be optimal for working that day, for instance, if the area is expecting rain, post a short message to let them know they should bring gear appropriate for the weather. And this just enforces your communication with the group. While the entire audience will see the posts such as these, it shows that there is a cooperative environment where volunteers and members are looking out for one another. Pictured here on the right is a rebuild in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Here's a photo from the Lutheran Disaster Response Facebook page. This is a great example of the type of photos that can be shared to show how your LTRG is making progress. So if you already are using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media channels, your newsfeed will show all the updates that your network is posting. Keep your network interested with links, photos, videos, and important, useful information. Photos are really good because they're eye-catchy and they take up a lot of space when you in a newsfeed. So if you're already a member and you see you watch the newsfeed as updates are being posted, a lot of times pictures will catch your eye more than just a text or a tweet. It is a good idea to have the content that you post revolve around the mission statement of the LTRG. As your community is still in the recovery phase, talk to those involved to gather interest in forming a long-term recovery group. Taking photos of the general areas that are affected will give your network an idea of what was affected in your community. In some disasters, there may be areas where people have lost their life. It is not a good idea to take photos that may negatively affect a deceased person's families or friends. Take special precautions when taking photos and be mindful of what you share. Earlier I mentioned that oxytocin is linked to emotions such as love, trust, and generosity. This is where social media ties into donations management. Keeping in touch with your network via Facebook, Twitter, or any platform that you choose automatically spikes oxytocin levels, as research has shown, in the brain. The more connected your network feels to your cause, the more likely it is to raise the emotions that are linked to oxytocin. So not only will this raise the level of trust your network has with your group, but it will also encourage them to give to your organization. As families move into their newly rebuilt and reconstructed houses, it will take time to make it a home. In a disaster, many families will lose the things that they have collected over the years that once made their house feel like home. The wedding photos with your brother dancing goofy or the bridesmaids tackling over the bride's bouquet will be gone. Or grandma's rocking chair or grandpa's fishing trophies. And these are things that make your house feel like home. Homes are filled with memories. So after much effort and care, a house can once again become a home. While not the direct responsibility of the LTRG Rebuilding Group, it is part of recovery, and it may be the Spiritual Care Committee's responsibility, and they can help put this kind of work into action. Social media can be an excellent way to garner support to gather items that help families create a home. Post items that you need and ask your network for specific items. Post a before and after photo of the survivor's home, with permission of course, and it is a great way to supplement your efforts to find these items. From the Ground Up is a 30-minute documentary about the wives of the fallen firefighters that responded to the terrorist attacks of 9/11. The film discusses the lives of each woman and how they are still coping with the loss of their loved one 10 years later. While most disasters will certainly not be as devastating as 9/11, this is a great example of sharing what is going on in the community at milestone anniversaries. I have seen communities that have started a long-term recovery committee up to a year after a disaster has struck the area, and others that have been established well before. Whichever is relevant to your situation, creating a video of the people involved in response and recovery, both short and long-term, can pull at the heartstrings of your audience. It is a great way to garner donated dollars or gather a pool of volunteers that are eager to help. Some ideas include interviewing clients or filming a disaster tour through the disaster-affected area. Shown here on the left, or shown here on the right side of the screen, the lower right-hand side of the screen, is a before and after video of the 2011 Joplin tornado. These are great ways to show your community is recovering after disaster. And if you search before and after Joplin tornado on YouTube, you'll find the video that is pictured here. Don't forget to include Twitter as part of your social media strategy. Twitter can be a great supplement of any efforts you create. By tweeting short updates, the terms that you use will be searchable on Monitor, Twitterlizer, and other Twitter analytic tools. It is a good idea to link it to popular hashtag terms that are already being used so that your LTRG can be part of the conversation. I'll briefly share what hashtags are next. Pictured here is a brief summary of how you can link both accounts. Hashtags are the pound symbol attached to keywords in trending topics. Here is a description of what hashtags are and how they can be used. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned how social media is used in all phases of disaster. It is a good idea to attach your tweets to popular hashtag terms that were used during these phases to gather the most visibility of your LTRG. Now we'll be talking about how to manage the time that is put into a social media strategy, the resources that you have, and the people that are involved. If your LTRG has enough money in your budget for a public information officer or a communication officer, having social media become a part of his or her communication strategy, can help document important milestones in recovery and celebrate them with your network. However, if you do not have a budget for a PIO or a communications officer, you can involve at least one member from each component of your LTRG, for example, volunteer management, donations management, construction management, to be responsible for taking photos, video, and gathering useful information to be shared on your social media platforms. 10 years ago, it was very rare for people to take photos, video, and write about their daily experiences and share them. But today, we share videos, photos, and thoughts we have on a daily basis through our social media platforms. It is common to share details such as what you ate, or where you went, or what you saw that day. It is very likely that a few members already engage in a social media activity on a daily basis. So ask that these members add a few things to a social media site daily for about 10 to 15 minutes, or 15 to 20 minutes, according to how much time they have during the day. Some may argue that Google Plus is very similar to Facebook. It has a lot of the same functions, such as sharing with friends, posting videos, photos, and content. But one thing that may be helpful for your LTRG is the Hangout function. Our ERS team has used it to have our team meetings, and while it is not a perfect system, it's free and you can use it if members are not able to meet face-to-face. One function that I've seen among VOED groups is Google Groups. Google Groups allows you to send messages to members of your group without having to type in every person's email address individually. The program will allow you to create a group and an email address that you can keep in touch with your members. So, for example, if you create a group about cupcakes, because you love cupcakes, with the email address cupcakes@googlegroups.com, all you'd have to do is type in that address to get in contact with all the members of the group. So there's no need for typing in individual email addresses anymore. I have seen that this has been helpful in saving time, and it's also good in keeping the conversation going among members. So it's a good way to start a conversation on when to have the next meeting and where. So this image that I'm showing here shows all the function that Google Plus has, and if you check it out, it might be a lot more helpful than you think. Here is a list of various popular blogging sites. The most popular is WordPress, shown here at the top. Each has very unique characteristics, and Tumblr is popular for sharing photos. Posterous is popular because of the reblog function. That means you can share what you like with your networks. Xanga has been around for quite a while, so that's one of the reasons why it's so very popular. And Weebly is popular because how customizable the pages are. So in a nutshell, these are just a few popular blogging sites. Storyfy is a unique blogging platform, and it allows users to tell stories by curating social media. So what that means is that you can write out your story as you would a blog, but what is unique about this platform is that it allows you to share a link from other social media platforms and that I just mentioned. And this is an example of a report I did on Montana during a blizzard last week. So I could use YouTube, and I also put in a link from Twitter as well. One of the guest speakers today, Scott Rauter, will talk about how this social media platform is great for grant writing. So our first guest speaker today is Malcolm Hardy. Malcolm is currently working on his PhD in emergency management, and he is also a female voluntary agency liaison, and he resides in St. Louis. He has worked with volunteers and social media since 2007. If you have any questions for the guest speakers today, please type them in your question box at the right, and we might have some time to entertain a few. So, hi Malcolm.
Hello.
Hi. So tell me about your experience with social media and volunteer management. How did social media help, and what are some of the things that you learned from using it in the short term and how it extends into the long term? And how do you think LTRGs can use it to their advantage?
Well, first I want to definitely harp on how great this presentation has been so far, and has definitely helped me better manage what I've thought through the years about social media and how it can be cultivated. With specificity to what probably many people are thinking through is how does this all connect to very specific experiences people might have through social media. Much as was already covered, you have a lot of the initial phase of a disaster when individuals are looking for answers, and in the vacuum of official responses or information or people not receiving information about whatever it may be, they're likely going to look at a variety of different sources and get whatever information is being provided by whoever is providing it. In that vacuum steps a variety of individuals, whether it be you posting on a Facebook page, your own or others, or it may be other individuals or official government websites. As a long-term recovery group, and I've seen this in the past, whether it be an already mentioned Restore Joplin, or what you're seeing in the New Jersey and New York shorelines during the response to Sandy, a lot of focal points of information gathering where somebody in their living room decides that they want to start a Facebook page dedicated to restoring the Jersey Shore as an example, and all of a sudden overnight they have 70,000, 80,000, 90,000 followers, people who will receive information from whoever is posting that on that web page. And they become a major influencer in the networks. What they put there, how they put it, what pictures, as you covered earlier, is going to drive what goes on. And in my experience, the earlier those go up, the more people tag on, and those are people who will stay with that organization or stay with that Facebook page for a very long time. And there are people that if you catch them early, you can help get them to give or support or volunteer in a very beneficial way rather than a very harmful way, which is a very important aspect to many local communities that are inundated with a lot of goodwill and a lot of support and a lot of help, but also a lot of misinformation and people that are not exactly trying to help. And I hope that assists everyone in kind of understanding, I mean, specifically with social media and how early on the conversation really drives later, and how you can kind of support that.
Cool. Is there any specific groups or examples that you've worked with in the past few years?
I apologize. As I said before, Restore Joplin's a big one. Every nonprofit has generally their own media arm, whether that be an individual or a variety of people in a section to kind of articulate to the greater body of people out there what their mission is, how they want to do things, etc. When dealing with long-term recovery groups, and because they're long-term, you're trying to keep a conversation going for years, and you're trying to keep interest for years, long after the media packs up and leaves, and long after those individuals have lost focus. You're going to try to continually engage a population that might be support through money, materials, and manpower. And with like Restore Joplin, or what you're seeing now on the Jersey Shore, and I use these two as an examples as very specific things that are happening, as an example of a longer-term agency, which you've already mentioned previously, that has articulated to a social media arena what they need, how they need it, how many people. Just the other day, that organization posted on their Facebook page they're doing a fundraiser that is at a variety of different locations in the Joplin area that's going to go to benefit the recovery. That goes to 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people who then will share it with their networks. And that gives you an idea of how specifically that message gets out there and is shared to literally hundreds of thousands of people with one keystroke. And it's all because, as you said earlier on the call, on this webinar, everybody wants to be connected, and social media is a connectivity tool. And as you look at specifically this event here in Sandy, which I'm working, we are constantly monitoring all of these social media conduits to get better information about what information people are sharing and why and where they're getting it. But more importantly, who on the ground is trying to organize connectivity to needs and who are going to be the seed people for the long-term recovery effort. And many individuals might not know it yet, but that's what they're moving towards, and that's what helps people get connected to resources.
Malcolm and Kool-Aid, I've got a question I think I need to ask you if you can take a minute to take a question, okay?
Absolutely.
It's really a question that came in three phases, so let me read all three of them. It's from the same
That's okay,
person.
Brian.
Okay. It's,
Yeah.
Isn't focusing on agency a failure to understand response in a climate of social media? Then Melissa's second question was, are you welcoming Occupy to this? And then to clarify that, she says, meaning how is a top-down organization learning how to work with grassroots groups like Occupy? How do we help set up non-hierarchical disaster relief? And finally then she says, it seems like your team has purposely ignored the role of Occupy in this effort. We created hashtag Sandy Volunteer, the Amazon registry, and hubs. Why is this?
Melissa, there was, we weren't purposely ignored. I didn't purposely ignore the Occupy role. I just haven't really seen it extensively into emergency management. But I don't know, Malcolm, do you have anything to expand on that?
And this sounds like it's more pointed to the general framework of an operation, and this is an important thing to cover with these things. A lot of times people, if they're not visibly looking at a conversation, believe that it doesn't happen. To give an example, we are actively engaged with Occupy in a variety of different places, and they're doing an immeasurable amount of support, and to believe that they are to focus on a top-down hierarchical structure is not necessarily where I would go, because they do have a hierarchy in the sense of who is doing what and why and where and who do you go to for a resource. It's not an authoritative system, but it is an authority of information and knowledge and capability, in the sense, which may be where she is going with the question, in the sense that how do you develop a meritocracy, or how do you develop a process of making sure the most capable get into a role, which is always what long-term recovery committees kind of gravitate towards to do. And in talking about how you get these people to the right place, social media becomes an incredible resource to make sure that somebody who is A, willing, and B, capable gets to the place that somebody A needs and B is able to receive that assistance. And I hope that answers the question.
If I may, from an old-timer's perspective, say that there's also a difference between early response, which is very much hierarchical, because government authority, i.e. the fire chief, or the police chief gets to say who can go and who can stay out. But then as it segues into long-term recovery, it becomes more collaborative and less hierarchical. But when command and control structures are in charge in those initial phases, it definitely is a hierarchical process, and it's probably going to stay that way until government changes the very nature of government, you know. But certainly long-term recovery tries to encourage every person and every organization, whether it's a collaborative or a structured organization, to participate in the long-term recovery process.
Absolutely, Brian. That's an important point. Critically to these whole things is to identify the difference between authority, like with government and a variety of things, and inclination. Because a lot of the groups that end up starting long-term recovery, a lot of the people inside their network are people that just feel compelled to do it. They don't have any measure of like political authority or anything like that, but they do feel a mandate to do it, whether it be through faith or through altruistic intention. And that's important to know that everybody comes to the table of long-term recovery through a different avenue. And that doesn't mean that it's any... Go ahead.
And that's one of the hard parts about long-term recovery, is getting all of the willing people who have a commitment to this recovery to be at the same table. So that's all, but that's a collaborative, not a hierarchical way of working. So,
absolutely.
And if we have another question, if this is a good time for questions, or do you want to forge ahead, Kool-Aid?
Scott Router is logging on right now, so we can take that question right before he gets on.
Okay, Tammy asks, do you have examples of social media policies of what members of a VOAD or long-term recovery committee can post on social media?
Oh, that's good.
That would be a really I haven't seen any yet, but Scott Router, he's been working extensively in our next guest speaker in developing social media platforms and strategies for long-term recovery groups. So he might have he might answer your question when he comes on, and he's going to be coming on very shortly. But to answer the question now, I have not seen any, Tammy.
I will say this to that point specifically, is that it's not really, I mean, you're going to want to develop a policy for your specific group. And to remember that social media is complicated in this world because what you post goes viral very quickly. And a lot of Congress people and government officials and people learn this fact too late when they tweet something in commentary to something, and they can never get rid of that. So when you're working in a long-term recovery group and you are vitally connected to people that are going to assist you, a big policy is to know that whatever you put out there stays out there, and that these, as much as it's a help that this information and this connectivity is like lightning fast, it also is to step back and measure your responses and realize that you don't always have to say what to fill a vacuum of information, and to make sure that you're careful about what you put out there, and because once it's out there, it stays.
Okay. Tammy has her hand up, so I'm going to open her mic and see if she wants to follow up a question. Go ahead, Tammy. Oh, she has, Tammy, she has sent another response. She says, we are developing one for the tri-state COAD, that would mean Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and would be happy to share when we are finished.
Great, Tammy. I think that I think that would be great. I'll be happy to get in touch with you. Send me an email at kfun@churchworldservice.org at the end of this presentation. Or you can find me on Facebook or like is our Church World Service page, and it'll definitely I'll definitely want to talk to you about what your co-ad is doing. I see that Scott Router has logged in. So Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us your experience.
Thank you all.
Scott, your mic is open. Scott, your mic is open.
Hi, Scott. Are you there?
All right.
Cool.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So
I can hear you just fine. Thank you. You are a little bit muffled, so just turn up your volume a little bit if you can.
Okay, I'll move the mic closer. Did that help any?
That helped a lot. Thank you. So our second guest today is Scott Router, and he is a course instructor for the Social Media for Disaster and Response and Recovery at the National Preparedness Training Center. He has set up a social media strategy for Astoria, Oregon after a recent wildfire, and he has also worked with and researched strategies of successful LTR groups that have used social media. And Scott is also the president of the Oregon Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. So thank you so much for joining us. And tell us a little bit about the Astoria fire and how you use social media to create a long-term recovery effort.
Well, excuse me. Thanks for having me, Kule. And
Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to. The effort that we put together for the Astoria fire, it was a fire that destroyed a historic structure, a big old cannery structure that had about 28 businesses of different sizes, and it served a huge amount of people in the community, including there was a behavioral health county building, county facility in there. I don't have to go through the list, but food service places, salons, all kinds of businesses in this place. So for a town of 10,000 people, that could have been a very, very devastating problem. And what we did was we set up a recovery effort, and this was not an official VOAD recovery effort. This was not in any way connected to VOAD. It's just I had already been using these tools and testing them. So it was a good opportunity to test them. And we had great success in helping track people as they looked for new spaces. This fire hit on a Thursday night, and a friend of mine who's a graphic designer set up the blog while I was separately setting up Facebook and Twitter accounts and a curated stream called Astorify at a site called storify.com. And so she and I found out that we were both working on it and threw in our resources together, and the two of us operated this recovery effort. And once we had the blog set up, and left it open for the public to use, it pretty much handled itself. It was a beautiful thing to watch. We put together the blog with different categories so people could know where to go to talk about what problem they had. We had an area for if you needed stuff, if you had stuff available to donate, an area for people to talk about donations, to talk about events. And we actually, from the very start, we set this up to operate as a nuts and bolts recovery effort. And what that gave us was the ability to tell people whenever they got on the site and started talking sort of gossipy or got a little cranky, we told them, that might be perfectly fine for you to have that conversation elsewhere, but this is a nuts and bolts recovery site. So we had a link right on the blog for them to go to Facebook. And with Facebook, they have to actually pretty much use their own name unless they set up a fake account. So that was nice because it sort of kept the gossiping down to a minimum. We told people from the start that it was not a site for commercial use, and it was not a site to advertise, and it was so anyway, it went very well. My friend Tiffany also, she was the graphic designer that built the blog. She also had access, she had a close relationship to the Chamber of Commerce, and also had access to a downtown inventory of properties. So what that allowed us to do was we put up a lot of collaborative documents including a spreadsheet with all available downtown properties. And that meant that people were, after the fire Thursday, people were running around by Friday afternoon with this printed out spreadsheet of properties looking for their temporary and new locations. We also put up a Google map so that people could, whenever we heard from the chamber or from people themselves that they had a new location or a temporary location, we put that on the Google map so people that were looking for their the businesses that they needed to go to could actually find them and find a temporary phone number if there was one. So this all happened very fast, and it was very helpful. There are lots of examples of people that are doing this. Rebuild Joplin for the Joplin tornado did a tremendous job. I'll give one example of one that was helpful, but used Facebook as a front end, as sort of the hub instead of a blog. And there was a paper from the University of Missouri about the Branson Tornado Info Facebook page. That's Branson Tornado Info. If you look it up on Facebook, you'll find it. And the problem that they had was, and it said so in the paper, was that they had made 15 different agencies admins on the page. So that meant that people were posting, because of the way Facebook scrolls, people were reposting old information just to keep theirs at the top. So not optimal. I think Facebook probably would be just fine for a small social media effort, but whenever you get as big as a tornado or something like that, depending on the scale, it really is limited, although still extremely helpful and important. I think something like 3 million people checked in the day of the Sandy hurricane, telling people that they're okay, friends and family and such, so it's an important thing. I'll stop talking for a second and see if you wanted to respond to any of that.
Oh no, that's very great information. And you mentioned before that you can use Storify for grant writing as well. How do you think that would be helpful to use Storify in that process for grant writing?
Well, I think what it's most helpful for is, along with just getting in there early during the response phase, and knowing you can find so much information on social media from both traditional media that post in there. They post their traditional, newspaper stories, their videos, all kinds of stories. And if you can save that information during the response phase, it could be very powerful, persuasive images and videos and things that you could put in when you go to write a grant in long-term recovery. Maybe that's a year later, 2 years later, but you still would easily be able to track that information because you managed to save it up front. The other thing I found was that it was helpful, social media was very helpful for me to find connections to local people who were doing spontaneous volunteer organization, who were organizing events for fundraising. And those people, whenever, in Oregon, we are nowhere near having a VOAD or a COAD in every county. So if I can see those people on social media, those are the people I want to contact in order to pull them into a COAD or VOAD if possible, or a long-term recovery group.
Excellent. Is there any advice that you'd want to give for people who are just starting their long-term recovery processes and using Facebook?
Definitely. A couple of tools that are very important to learn how to use, if you're not on them yet, are Skype for chat, not for voice, but for text chat. Skype or Google+, either one would work just fine. The groups that I work with doing the social media disaster efforts and the virtual operation support teams all use Skype because we can have an ongoing text chat, and then the next person that comes on duty after we're going off can look back through that chat and track some of the things that have been happening. And people don't have to be in the room at the same time if it's not a voice chat. People can come in, and this is handy both for just long-term organization between disaster deployments or activations, and it's useful for during a disaster. So Skype chat or Google chat are great. And then also collaborative documents are so important now, because if you have a live collaborative document that you can share information with people, you can set up spreadsheets, you can set up forms and push that out through social media. If you, like for instance, the other day we realized there were so many volunteer efforts going on for Sandy that there were so many you couldn't even track them all. So I set up a very quick Google form and pushed that out via Facebook and Twitter, and asked people to post if they heard about volunteer efforts into that form. And so I put about 3 things in there myself, and the rest of it is filled in itself, just as people find that information, and they're searching on Twitter, you know, for the words volunteer and Sandy, and they're finding it and going and helping us build that list. So those are 2 very, very powerful tools, and you might want to ask them to check out the Virtual Operations Support Team Basics presentation as well.
Okay. Send me that information, and then I'll post it on our Facebook page to get that word out.
I sure will. That's great.
Thank you, Scott, for joining us. I'm going to wrap up the presentation. If you can stay on, we're going to have questions at the end of the presentation. But if you are not able to, I totally understand. But thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. I'll probably, yeah, I'll stay on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the question is, with all the information that is being shared through social media, who can I trust? Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that social media is used to prepare communities and emergency managers before a disaster. It is a good idea to build a network that you will be able to trust should a disaster strike. But if you are not able to build a network beforehand, here are some of the things to consider when deciphering the good information from the bad. Always be sure to check sources. Good sources of information include news stations, emergency managers, first responders, faith-based organizations, or organizations that are directly involved with the disaster. A good strategy is to repost information directly from these users to keep information in its original form. There will be many users that will be sharing information, so double check where they get their information. Be sure that these users are a good source and come from a trusted network. And in some cases, a user might not be so trustworthy, and they might share false information and spread rumors. So it is a good idea to tell your network what the facts are and share your resources. Rumors can hinder the recovery process, so you want to be sharp at detecting them and quick to respond to them before it's too late. And finally, be sure to encourage likes within your network or invite members to be part of your group. This will streamline your messaging process and create a sense of trust among your network, and share the information all in one area rather than having it spread out. Always share information that is positive, useful, and entertaining when appropriate. Pictured here is a group that I'm a part of. It is called the Hawaii Virtual Operations Support Team. The mission for the group is to support emergency management and discovery and disaster recovery efforts with the use of new communication technologies and social media tools. This team of trusted agents can lend support via the internet on site to those on site who may be otherwise overwhelmed by the volume of data generated during a disaster. So this is just an example of the type of groups that are being formed in the preparedness phase or during peacetime without the threat of a disaster. Another concern when using social media is privacy. Because information posted in social media networks are meant to be shared, it is never a good idea to share information using these platforms. Any type of confidential information should never, under any circumstance, be shared on social media platforms. If client information must be sent electronically, use email because it is less likely for it to be misshared. When working with an LTR group, the social media profile that you create may be managed by multiple users and the password might also be shared. Information that is on the group page or message between users will be seen by anyone with access to the account. So be safe and send any client information using email. Email messages can have a legal disclaimer, while social media information is meant to be shared. Legalities can take up a lot of time, so it is a good idea to be safe from the beginning and don't be a negative example. Social media is only one tool in your recovery toolbox. It is unwise to rely only on one tool to help you along with your long-term recovery process for communication. Social media is a great way for your network to stay informed with what you are doing. However, it should not be the only way to keep in touch. Think of using social media as a way of documenting and sharing information that can be useful for presentations to the LTR group, the executive boards, stakeholders, and donors. Keeping up with your network will really show how organized you are and has a great potential for reeling in much-needed donations. It is always a good idea to follow up with other forms of communication, for example, phone calls, emails, texts, or face-to-face conversation, rather than just relying on your social media networks alone. When posting to your social media channel, get to know your audience, reply to their comments, and thank them for their likes. In the meantime, you'll notice who the most active users are, and you'll be able to monitor the kind of trending topics that are being thrown around. Some users are definitely very active while others may not. So one thing to remember is don't get too discouraged if your post doesn't get liked in the first 2 minutes or so. Your hard work will pay off and it will be appreciated among the executive boards, the stakeholders, and the donors. If you post a great deal of information on one day, for example, after an event with an LTRG, encourage your network to visit your page via an email invitation or a text message, especially if that particular person was featured in the photos that you're sharing. So now we have some time for some question and answers. Brian?
Just two quick questions as reminders. Somebody again asked if they could see the slides at the end of the presentation. The slides will be posted at www.cwserp.org as a PDF file within a few days, and the recording of today's webinar will also be available there. One of the attendees during the hour today asked if he could see the entire attendee list so that he could see who in his organization was attending today, so he could pass the word on to other persons in his network. So I did open the attendee list to everyone, and if you have an interest in seeing who from your organization or who in your area might have been on the webinar today, please look at the attendee list before we close the webinar. Then one last question for you, Kule, in case unless others come up, is of all the social media, what would you say the best one is for retaining information from those early enthusiastic volunteers who see it on the news, but whom we really need 2 years down the road as we're doing rebuilding?
I see what you mean. I think, from my perspective, I think a good way would be to keep them informed through Facebook. Make sure that you invite them to be a friend, and you can definitely create groups on Facebook of friends. So just to keep them on the back burner. I'm going to pull up my screen really quick. with Facebook, let me just move a few things around. So here is my Facebook page, and here you can see where my cursor is, where your friends are. You can have a update place where you can keep your close friends, your family. There's your church. Here's my church world service coworkers. There's yes. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Where did you lose me?
When you went to go to your screen to show something.
Oh, okay. It might have the internet connection might have kicked me off there. But here is where you can find your like what to answer the question is, how can you keep in touch with a volunteer a few years down the line? So you can keep a tab of different friends that are and you can create from in different categories. So here I have, and this is something that that Facebook has, and you can definitely figure out if there's, you can probably figure out ways to rename these functions and put on a different tab for whichever you a name for whichever you would like to call them. So there's close friends, family. I have church world service updates. I have HPU friends. This is from when I was in college, and people who are in Honolulu, the Honolulu area. So I would suggest that you use those tabs to keep in touch with them further down the line. So when you know, when it comes to a point when you know you need more volunteers, you can go to those tabs and say, oh, okay, I need this certain person for I don't know, for an electricity, for construction, and have them available that way, and just let them know that to be on alert in a few months or years when they do actually need your help. Does that answer your question? If you're still online?
Yes.
Okay.
I have no more questions. So if unless somebody adds a question in the next minute or so, we've come to the end of the scheduled time. Kule, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. And please like us on Facebook, and I'll keep you posted when our information will be available, and when we will be having upcoming webinars. Our next webinar is going to be in December, the first Tuesday of December, and it's going to be LTR Basic once again. We usually have it 4 times a year, but we're going to have it once again we're going to have it a little bit more often than we usually would because Hurricane Sandy has built the need for it. So tune in on September or December 2nd if you haven't seen LTR Basics. It will be specifically tailored to Hurricane Sandy in some respects. So if I have no more questions, I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you for joining us, and hope to hear from you through our social media channels. Email me if you have any questions or if you want to share any of your stories. Thank you for joining us.
Again, thank you, Kule.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks, Scott, for being on today. Thank you so much.
The organizer has ended the session.